Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced he is launching a probe to investigate any and all wrongdoing. Oh boy, we knew this was coming. We predicted this on the show last week when he started talking about...
he told us as much. He wasn't completely candid about it, but he was dropping hint bombs, and we were listening.
That he was going after these biopharmaceutical complex for lies and any wrongdoing regarding these experimental shots, these COVID shots. So he said, today I'm announcing a petition with the Supreme Court of Florida to impanel a statewide grand jury to investigate any and all wrongdoing with respect to COVID-19 vaccines. DeSantis said during the Public Health Integrity Committee roundtable, and he had all of these people, doctors from around the state, all surrounding him in support of this. So watch him drop this bombshell. Watch.
Florida, it is against the law to mislead and to misrepresent, particularly when you're talking about the efficacy of a drug. We see just recently, Florida got $3.2 billion through legal action against those responsible for the opioid crisis. And so it's not like this is something that's unprecedented. So today, I'm announcing a petition with the Supreme Court of Florida to impanel a statewide grand jury to investigate any and all wrongdoing in Florida with respect to COVID-19 vaccines. And we anticipate that we will get the approval for that. That will be something that will be impaneled, most likely in the Tampa Bay area. And
Look
that
at the
will
people
come
behind him
with
clapping.
legal processes that will be able to get more information and to bring legal accountability for those who committed misconduct.
Wow. Holy smokes. I mean, let's give him a round of applause. I mean, really, he's the first now to go on the record saying we are going to investigate these pieces of garbage and go after these people for this. This is huge.
Yes.
A lot of other people can talk. He's doing it and impaneling the Supreme Court to go after them. He says this will come with a legal process. We'll be able to get more information, bring legal accountability to those who committed misconduct. We will be able to get the data, whether they want to give it to us or not in Florida. It is illegal to mislead and misrepresent, especially when you're talking about the efficacy of a drug.
And I just want to say, I see a lot of sentiment on Twitter and stuff like that. Like, people are just devastated about, is there ever going to be any good news? And it's things like this that help you realize when you see what's happening on Twitter with the Twitter files. The power is crumbling. They are worried. There's more people going after them. More stuff is coming to light. And that's a positive thing for me, because the more this stuff comes to light, the more they're held into account, the better it is for us.
Yeah, sunlight is the ultimate disinfectant, isn't it? Anna wrote us earlier today, and Natalie and I, and said, I just stumbled across and found your show. Thank God I found your show. Because I can't stand this corruption. To which I wrote her back and said, yeah, all you need to do, we need to shine a light on these people. And one way you can do it is to share this show with other people, smash this like button. It pushes us further out into the algorithm against YouTube's wishes when you do that, and share this kind of story so we can actually hold these powerful people to account. We don't do this show for our health.
Yeah. She's one of our accountants, and she wasn't sure what it was we're up to. She's just our bean counter. And she was like, wow, this is what I'm working for this couple. That's great. And we have started to see certain nuance pieces fall apart. For instance, in other countries, we saw in Canada, there was litigation against the vaccine mandate by people who I think they were immigrants, who said, what was the science? Show us how government, related the science to mandates. And we saw government employees writing each other and said, quick, I need some science, right?
Right.
So we've seen already these cracks in litigation in other countries. In the United Kingdom, now a regulatory board for the pharmaceutical industry says that Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla did mislead when he talked about the risk of COVID to young children when he was promoting the vaccines before they were approved for children. So these things are not small pieces. They all add up to a narrative full of questions we were not allowed to ask.
And this is maybe why DeSantis is also going up against the CDC. So he also announced today that he wants to establish in Florida, get rid of the CDC and instead place a Public Health Integrity Committee, which may replace, we don't know if it's fully going to, the much publicized CDC. He said, we're creating the Public Health Integrity Committee a committee of expert researchers that will be able to assess recommendations and guidance related to public health care, but particularly being able to offer critical assessments of things like that bureaucracies like the FDA, CDC, and the NIH are doing, Fauci's outfit. Listen to him talk about this.
And then finally, and this is exciting, we've seen over the past few years really the bankruptcy of the public health establishment. We've seen a lot of ridiculous partisanship. I mean, I'll never forget that after hectoring people in April of 2020, you can't leave your house. They were all upset at Florida because people were on the beach and playing golf and all this stuff, that if you left your house, you were almost like a bad person until you started to have George Floyd protests. And you had massive numbers of people that are meeting to protest. And these public health people wrote a letter where like hundreds, maybe thousands of them signed saying, yes, we don't think you should be leaving your house normally, but we endorse the protests, and basically said that it was important that people went out even in big groups and protested. And then they said in the letter that does not mean they support protests for other things like people that wanted to protest lockdowns. And so if that just didn't take the mask off and just show, that this is all just a huge political farce, I don't know what is. But the reality is, even this in June of 2020, I think you've continued to see people in these bureaucracies and in this establishment behave in ways that have totally squandered any type of confidence or goodwill that people would have. And our CDC at this point, anything they put out, you just assume at this point that it's not worth the paper that it's printed on. And so it's not serving a useful function. It's really serving to advance narratives rather than do evidence-based medicine. And
so that's when he announced this new committee in Florida, the Public Health Integrity Committee. I see someone in our chat just explained on Twitter, said that the CDC is what did he say? A CDC is a controlled organization now, like basically.
Well,
run.
Yeah.
It's sad. It's true.
It's like a marketing arm for the pharmaceutical industry.
Yes.
In Candace Owens' book, she talks about the protests, how we had all been in lockdowns. You can't leave your home. You can't have Halloween. Oh, but there's protests. Okay, go out. That's okay. And her narrative around it, which has a lot of truth to it, is that, the Democratic policies are really meant to keep minority groups sort of in a victim mentality and keep them on the dole, basically, in order to be dependent on the government so that they can assure their votes forever. It's not really an empowerment movement at all. And so anything that stirs up dependency on the government and, victim mentality and hatred absolutely does work in the favor of the Democratic Party. And that's why these protests were good for one party and not the other. So that same party that had kept canceling people because they wanted to go to Red Robin, then were empowering another group, COVID be damned. And you can't make an answer for that. There's no answer for that. Even if you felt like very viscerally affected by the protests, you had to realize that you were promoting a different set of standards for two different types of people.
Yeah.
Well, and also the arbitrary, like at the very beginning, they were charging companies $1,000 a day if they stayed open. So Walmart, Target, all these big companies that could afford that $1,000 were open like nothing was going on. They just paid the $1,000 fine. And then you had all these small businesses that couldn't afford that. So they had to shut down. So from the very beginning, this looked like a ploy to just completely corporatize this whole thing. And it corporatized even to the CDC because they were doing the bidding of the pharmaceutical industry, as was the FDA, because they were complicit in hiding those documents for 75 years.
We had an interview with Carol Roth, the author of the great book, The War on Small Business, where she lays out exactly how the government chose winners and losers during the pandemic. For instance, a small dog hair cutting place, right, couldn't stay open, but PetSmart could still cut dog's hair. Why does that making it, why could you cut a dog's hair and not a human's hair? Those kind of things the government just allowed.
It didn't stop Nancy Pelosi from getting her hair done. Remember that?
Yes. Yeah.
She was above the law, of course, as usual.
I mean, the thing that really made me so crazy is there's a restaurant in Southern California that spent $80,000 to retrofit for outdoor dining. And then they closed down again due to COVID surges, but let Hollywood film a movie in that parking lot and offer outdoor dining for craft services. Why is that allowed? Why can't the private business make money with outdoor dining, but craft services can for Hollywood? Yeah. These things they were blaring injustices.
One final note from Governor DeSantis on some of the final points here that he was making at this press conference. Listen to this.
And just show, that this is all just a huge political farce. I don't know what is. But the reality is, even this in June of 2020, I think you've continued to see people in these bureaucracies and in this establishment behave in ways that have totally squandered any type of confidence or goodwill that people would have. And our CDC at this point, anything they put out, you just assume at this point that it's not worth the paper that it's printed on.
I just want to play that again because it's so good. So he also noted not only did the vaccines not result in a reduction of all the all-cause mortality, but excess mortality actually increased in their state. So they want to investigate this and get to the bottom of this. Again, I'm all about it's enough. To me, talk is cheap, right? Like, okay, a politician who actually takes action to show, and I'm not saying I'm a huge DeSantis supporter of any kind. I'm just saying this is a huge moment. This is a huge move by a sitting governor of a state to investigate these clowns and get to the bottom of it. When you have the federal government who had been working in lockstep with them to hide and keep this information from ever getting out to the American people. So this is a big moment. Also, Florida Surgeon General was there, Joseph Ladapo, who was also present at that roundtable and claimed that the state is going to study the incidence in surveillance of myocarditis within a few weeks of COVID-19 vaccinations appearing and people who died. So they're absolutely going to start to study that specific issue as well about myocarditis in Florida. So we're going to get some really interesting data from the state of Florida. Well, so good on DeSantis.
And really quick too, it's a positive thing because we as people are stripped from the conversation. We do not have the power to do what he's doing. We try and we get shut down. You can't protest, you can't ask questions. But when it's somebody like this, we need people like him to do this because we can't do it alone. And so I commend him for that. I'm not a big fan either, but I commend him for that.
But I have some reservations because what if the CDC then mounts its own defense? Then that's on taxpayer dollars. Then we will be paying for the defense of the CDC against this litigation. What if the Justice Department decides to, for some reason, defend the pharmaceuticals in lockstep with the FDA? That is something that we could also be on the defense side, and I don't like that at all.
Maybe. I mean, they have indemnification over the vaccine itself, right? Those are the government contracts they signed with Pfizer and Moderna. But it does not, from what I understand, cover them for misleading the public about their vaccines. So that's one thing, to have the vaccines and have a contract, but it's totally another thing to mislead the public about what you knew and when you knew it.
Yes, but we have seen states now suing the Biden administration, such as Missouri and Louisiana, that are suing around what information was censored. And so that is also a possibility. But again, it's taxpayer dollars that will mount the defense.
Right.
And so that turns your stomach. At the same time, you want to see answers. I support these attorneys generals for what they're doing, but that it's federal tax dollars that's working against them, and that sucks.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.